Sakaya-san, please moderate the session.
Today, I'm gonna provide the session 4, which is democratic funding theory and the practice of quadratic funding and boarding. So here we have a great challenge here, Granwell here, and Haruseki, and Sakai-san. So probably almost people already know about what the grant now doing. So let me quick introduction about Haru-san. Go ahead. Wait, my mistake. The slide is depending on the. So the Sakai-san, go ahead.
So wait, should I introduce myself? Yeah. Hi, my name is Yasushi Sakai. So I just go through my slides? Yeah. 次お願いします。So I'm just going to jump right in. I'm from MIT. Although this is about quadratic voting, I use propagational proxy voting for urban decision making. So this is like very concrete. I guess I'm going to talk about today about Boston's approval process. This is, you need approval when some developer tries to develop, right? So can you go next, please? So permitting in Boston is crazy. It takes 400 days, and this is not like a generational real estate project. It's like a 7-story building. It still takes like 400 days. And what's kind of interesting is the city hall also admits that this is an issue. By the way, you have the page number, so if you can kind of look into it. The book also talks about a close topic about zoning, but that's my field. Next, please. So so everything is broken, so Boston is trying to modernize this. So there is what they call Article 80. This is the permitting process. You'll see on the bottom 10 policies, and you have 3 categorical kind of directions of the survey. What we did is we created a survey, and back of the hood we used propagational proxy voting to gauge which policies are most favorable, but also like which node or which intermediaries has most impact. Next, please. So what is propagational proxy voting? So people should really read Namerakaigi section 3-7, but it's also covered in the Plurality book, and very close concept called liquid democracy. But in a nutshell, it's kind of a more generalized version of it. So you can divide your votes, and then you can express nuances. So for example, if I can allocate 25% to a specific policy, and I can give half to maybe Glenn, maybe 25 to Code for Japan. So the model lets you do that. It doesn't force you to do it. But what I like is that you can choose the level of participation. So you have plurality or diversity in the form of participation. So next, please. So what you can do is, okay, for example, I have very strong relationship between creating stronger connections between recent planning and community benefits. This is talking about I don't need a second dog park. Or I can choose to say, well, I didn't really have time to look into each individual policies. I'm going to participate in a kind of a categorical level and say, well, I think effective engagement is important in this case. Next, please. But propagation proxy voting also lets you vote on different departments. So in this case, it's kind of a modified version of propagation proxy voting. But maybe I can say, well, in the historical preservation effort has been protecting the city, so they gain some part of my trust. So I'm going to allocate some trust to them. So really quickly, this is just a result. I don't have time to talk about how I compute this, but it was kind of reassuring and boring in a way because it was kind of validating kind of the sentiments towards the citizens. So first came the faster response times. Again, it takes 400 days. We want to ensure the response time from the city. Second was more opportunities to learn about projects to provide feedback. That's early engagements, so like online surveys like that. So what I want to kind of emphasize here is that the book talks about voting should not stand by its own. It should kind of work as tandem in the deliberation process or co-design process. Propagation proxy voting is really, really useful in terms of that. What do I mean? So while I compute, I can now, there's a kind of a second result saying that, oh, in this case, interdepartment coordination, category 3, collected some trust. And also, the development review team in planning department also collected trust. So I can use this type of information. So if I were to work, kind of open a hearing or a workshop, I can say, hey, public review team, you seem to have collected a lot of trust. Can you share us that thought process? And also, what do you think about interdepartmental coordination? So I really, thanks to Suzuki-san, this type of information really works with the deliberation. Next, please. So Glenn and I was talking about the other day about combining propagation of proxy voting or something like liquid democracy to quadratic voting. And the book also talks about this, but we can, I'm just putting this as one kind of further discussion for this session. Thank you.
All right, so thank you for Sakai-san. The next one from the Haru-san.
Thank you. Hello. I'm Haruseki from Code for Japan, founder of Code for Japan. And we are a civic tech community. Our vision is think together, create together. We, as a civic tech community, we built many digital public goods, like open source software or open data. And please go to the next slide. So I want to talk about the civic tech project. So as a civic tech community, I saw many challenges and projects happening from the community side. And someone starts a project, it starts from the individual experience or conception, and then maybe you can gather contributors. If you are lucky, you can create prototypes, and maybe someone join your project and start trial project, and after that, maybe nothing happens, and there is a death barrier of the civic tech. So no one it's very difficult to keep motivation because this kind of project is run by voluntary groups. So if you are lucky, you can get sustainable resources, and maybe companies, you can collaborate with universities or companies, but it's very difficult. So this is the main issues of civic tech, actually. So we need to think about resource and distribution. So we need, for the civic tech community has a very powerful way to find a solution, a new solution, innovative way, and the voluntary groups have a very strong motivation at the initial and at the beginning stage. But after until making prototype, so at that stage, we need resources, more diverse resources, including money, and maybe the government's help or something. So the question is, how can we get enough resources for sustaining the services, or how can we distribute the resources efficiently? It's very difficult, also difficult to find a way to distribute the resources to contributors who should get such kind of resources, or how can we measure the social impact of activities? This is also important because we have to give back something to the funders. So this is very difficult because we are a voluntary group. But we have some use cases of the this kind of the resource sharing, the collaborative project. We provide a Decidim to the Kakogawa City. This is open source software for the government or some institution who wants to collect the citizen voices and try to engage citizens. And this Decidim is have many functionality, but it includes the participatory budgeting. I'm very curious to run this type of the experimenting project in Japan, but in Japan there are not much this kind of participatory budgeting project not happen. But in Helsinki, Finland, so they allocate the budget for this kind of participatory budgeting, and citizens can vote to the what kind of project they want to spend their taxes. So maybe I'm thinking maybe we can use the quadratic funding for this kind of participatory budgeting, maybe in Japan. And I don't explain this, so you can read. And also we run this experimental project of using the quadratic funding in Japan. We collected 18 civic tech projects, and after that we collected the $2,100 US from around 100 donors. And we found that quadratic funding is very good way to ease the curve of the distribution. So we at this experimental project, so very niche project also could get funding. That is really good for the civic tech projects like us. Yeah, and also I will explain about the mechanism of the collecting visualizing the social contributions. We built the toban, which means toban in Japanese. The people have some roles in, let's say, the elementary school. You may be experienced as the soji toban or something. So this is kind of the way we try to visualize the contributors' activities. So if you get the role of the project manager or website designer, or you assign the role, or you get the role, and we can track that contributions, and also after getting some revenues, you can get rewards. We are trying to build such kind of system right now. And last things about funding phase is I launched a new institution called the Digital Coordination Disaster Response Digital Intelligence Support Team. So we are going to create some kind of funding, and then we distribute such funding to the digital public goods for digital. So for the the disaster response projects. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And let's back to what is the quadratic voting and the quadratic funding? What could be achieved with the balance of the democracy and the combination? So like we can skin the game how we want it or how we want to do. So probably that could be the explained by Graham where is fine. Right?
Great. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. Yasushi-san didn't mention it out loud, but he put on the screen that there was this guy named Charles Dodson. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Charles Dodson. No? Has anyone ever heard of Alice in Wonderland? Raise your hand. Not so many people, actually. Wow, Alice in Wonderland is one. If this was an American audience, almost everyone would have their hand up. Alma, have you ever heard of Alice in Wonderland? Yes. It's a very popular children's literature in the West. And Charles Dodson, who was also known as Lewis Carroll, who wrote that, one of his greatest academic contributions, he was a professor at Oxford, was to voting theory. So he was the originator of both the ideas of quadratic voting and the idea of liquid democracy, or, what do you call it? Propagational and proxy voting. Yeah. And these ideas are really, I think, examples of something that Professor Uno-san mentioned earlier, which is that we in the West often think of democracy as this fixed system. You vote for parliament or representatives and so forth. But really, we can and should think of democratic systems as advancing as much as our computers do. Why just vote for representatives? Why not vote for representatives who can you allocate to representatives and they can have different amount allocated to them, not just fixed districts, and then they can allocate to someone else. And why not have people be able to reflect how strongly they feel about things, or not just how strongly they feel about it. Maybe you could just say what you think is important in natural language. And maybe we could have many rounds. I mean, there are so many different ways that we could get to a vision of people expressing themselves. The forms that we have are like one snapshot of one thought that people had at one place. And in fact, the people who invented it at that one place, many of them said, this is going to have to radically change in a few years. This is just our attempt to try something. Thomas Jefferson, if you go to the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., it says, a quote from him where he says, I am not in favor of constant revolutions, but if a adult has to wear the suit that was made for him as a child, it would never work. And so I hope that the Constitution will be rewritten every quarter century. So we've gotten very far from this attitude. And I hope we can get back to this attitude of democratic experimentalism that Professor Uno-san was talking about. And quadratic voting is one example of it, but it's really just one step along a process. There was simple voting that we've had. There are ranked choice voting. There's approval voting. There's quadratic voting that lets you say how much you care about things, and then it has the right incentives for that. But then now Gitcoin is using something better, which is this connection-oriented quadratic voting, where you take into account the groups that people are a part of, you cluster them together, and then you give the sort of quadratic penalty, not just on individuals, but on any set of people who are already working together. And there are more sophisticated versions of that. And all of these things are part of, I think, what we need, which is to accelerate our systems of social organization to match the creativity that something like an AI model has, where you have all these different layers of voting occurring. And we think of that as some technical abstraction black box, but reality is it's just a more sophisticated version of the voting going on in society, and we need our social systems to catch up with that, and for the AI models to be made a bit transparent so that we can participate in them. So that's the vision we really want to get to, where we close that gap between the richness of our digital systems, which we know are so powerful, and the oversimplicity of our social systems that can't keep up.
Beautiful. So, in my opinion, the almost government decision is just allocating the resources. The Sakai-san is for the city planning, and Haru is working for the building the digital democracy platform for the Kakogawa or something like that. So I'm just wondering about what is the difficult things to implementing kind of like a voting system, and what is the difficult things about how to balance the identity based on the one person about one identity and conviction, yeah.
Before I think that Paul, 不思議の国のアリスみんな知ってます。
You know the Alice in Wonderland, right? Please raise your hand.
They all know Leia. Yeah.
Now people know. Lewis Carroll. How do you say Lewis Carroll in Japanese?
ルイス・キャロルですかね。
Lewis Carroll in Japanese.
Identity. Well, it's basically me coming from trying to use something from Mr. Suzuki. Propagation proximity is very difficult, I think, maybe because I work in the Western context, that the individualism is so strong that there's no such thing as, divide. I think I'm still struggling to how to kind of explain that you can split yourself and have like different things and these things share. So quite frankly, I'm sorry, but I'm struggling. Well, maybe like a reflection question is that, do people get it? And my experience doing all these workshops, small and big, you really need to have like a strong topic, and then for an hour, people do get it. So I don't know if I answered your question, but the meaning of identity, I mean, first of all, you need to have this kind of individual sense that, okay, I might support a specific political party, but I dislike their specific policies that they're pushing. So if you kind of explain that, if people get that, it's quite easy to kind of disseminate the concepts of these new computational social choice functions. Should I? Yeah.
But I think there's some interesting other analogies, like these ideas come up a lot in Catholic social thought. So maybe there's a role within the Catholic teachings to bring these up. They come up in neural networks because you're giving input to many different nodes. So for people who have that background, so I think you have to look for many different sort of ways to tell the story that connect to different phenomena in people's lives.
I will definitely try, but sometimes I'm facing NIMBYs. So that's like a very different, so NIMBY is like not in my backyard phenomenon. Those are very different ways of thinking. But yes, I'll definitely try out different ways to describe. But maybe, Seki-san, you have like ways to describe all these new technologies. Is it?
Yeah, so before explaining this kind of complexity, so the challenges of this kind of digital participation platform is collecting the voices itself. So it's very difficult to let the citizens to know this kind of opportunities. Even they got opportunities, they don't want to say something. Especially Japanese people don't want to share public opinions. This is the actual problem. It's not a digital related problem. So that we try to engage with people. If I go to the Kakugawa city and we organize workshops in high school and let them to think about the problem issues in the city and think about the new ways of solving. And after that, let them to put their idea to decision. And if there are many voices, maybe the other people want to say something to that. So it's very and also it's the topic is very topic is real policies. It affect to the someone, and we have to find stakeholders and go to them physically and ask their opinion. That kind of physical effort is really important.
Next question, I'm just wondering about the concept of the governance is exit where the people cannot fork from the anything, right? Every governance has to be agree about specific things. For example, like a city planning or something like that must be agreed by all of the stakeholders. So what's the voting should be doing in that's kind of really difficult decision making.
So what context are you thinking where there's everything is based on like people can exit? What's an example?
I mean, like all of the situation governance needed is requirement to have to fix the one way, right? There are no plan B or something like that because other option doesn't exist because the real program doesn't fork from the anything, right? So what's the voting or something like that could be using for that kind of the situation. Like people want to showing our opinion, but maybe it doesn't executed by someone, right? So,
I think he's talking about, like, for example, we can only live in one reality.
Yep.
And code-wise, we can fork. Yeah. So I think he's asking about, okay, what could voting or these governance mechanism, like, I don't know, maybe we can't, but what are the so I guess he's comparing with like code being so easy to fork and have different realities. What's the role of these governance systems?
Well, I mean, I think the notion that code is so easy to fork is a little bit illusory, because the thing is that code is easy to fork if you don't want to live in the same reality as other people. But often what we value is playing a game with someone else. And in fact, or watching content with someone else. I think this notion that code is so easy to fork is deceptive. Because yeah, it's easy for everyone to write a book, but it's hard for everyone to have the Bible. Because what makes the Bible is maybe that it's the Word of God, or maybe that so many people read it. And so I think that what we need is more, like, it's great to fork, but it's also great to have mechanisms for understanding who else is actually sharing that reality with you, and not being deceived that just because you've made a version that's the version that everyone is seeing. So we need mechanisms of understanding social context of consumption, as well as things that make it flexible to create your own version. And that, is of course what things like, Git and version control are supposed to be about. They're supposed to be about allowing those different versions, but also allowing understanding of use patterns.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like, the governance happens in pull requests, right? So, like, you do have that kind of very strong effort of trying to merge after you actually branch. So, but going back to Taka's initial question, yeah, it is interesting that what's going on in that pull request and like how it's going to be merged. That's like I think it's a work of art in terms of open sourcing. By the way, I have propagational proxy voting open source, so anyone can can help me out. But yeah, I think that's interesting. Like, I don't. It's not my field, like, how kind of this governance and open source works, but yeah, I think I agree on, yes, it's easy to fork, but sometimes there's some force of convergence too, also in software development.
I mean, one other comment I would make is, one other way to think about propagational proxy voting that maybe is easier for people to understand is reposting on social media. People understand the idea that by reposting, they're sort of adding their voice to the voice of others. And I think that's very related to what's going on in propagational proxy voting.
Yeah, certainly. But also, like, combining it to some kind of function, like quadratic, like if you have some kind of quadratic function, some kind of like attenuation or like maybe damping effect. I think those are super important. It is by research and papers that it is accused that liquid democracy sometimes concentrates trust too much. So Yeah, I think that's the right path to go. But then comes like how do you describe, and so I think that's a challenge. But I mean, it'll be my life work, so I'll just do it.
Right. I'm just wondering about to the Green. You invented about the quadratic voting and the quadratic funding, and then now we can see some of the implementing example in the real world. So based on the, I'm just wondering about what is if you have your criticism for the current existing implement, or what's your thought when you making this kind of mechanism?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there have been great experiments with it, and I think in general they've had pretty positive outcomes. But we know that there are limitations in quadratic voting, in particular, that it is not based on thinking about groups. And that's why connection-oriented quadratic funding has been almost totally taken over Gitcoin and is going much better than the original quadratic funding is going. And even that is like a total hack version of what we really want, which is to take into account as many social information as possible and do all the clustering and whatever. And also that is not as rich as, having many different layers or having people not just express how much they care, but their reasons. And so we know that there are, and the richer that you get, the harder it is to explain. So as we get richer, we need ways to have people visualize and have a sense for their role in these systems. So, there are so many criticisms and limitations and weaknesses of existing systems. And they're a massive improvement over not just systems we have, but even systems that are proposed like ranked choice voting and approval voting and so forth. So I hope very soon the tangibility of these things will not just give us a bunch of options, but also just give people a sense that this voting field, it really is like the computer field. There's all different generations, and then there's questions of product market fit and technological readiness and user experience and all. Like, we have to get to the point where this is not just there's one static thing, but there's this whole pipeline, and there's different investment in different areas of it, and we wouldn't expect that 4 years in the future you have the same things presented at Expo. You wouldn't expect that you have the same smartphone in 4 years. You wouldn't expect that 4 years at the next election you have the same election system. So we have to get into this thing of having a steady clip of product development and deployment and testing and improvement. And I hope we can get there with voting soon, the way that we have with software in other areas.
Good. If you guys have any response.
Yeah, so the quadratic funding mechanism is, we need a better user interface, obviously. So it's for me, it's difficult to explain what is the QF is for the normal people. But I don't think we can explain everything to the users. The user interface must be nice for just selecting and so we tried to build the system, but we found many area for improvement. Yeah, so user interface is a key to enable this kind of complicated systems.
There are many interesting physical analogies here that I think could be potentially harnessed in user interfaces. There's springs. Springs obey a quadratic rule. So if you pull on a spring, everyone knows that it gets harder to pull more than proportionally for how hard you pull it. There's if you fill up a triangle, the amount of water you need to put in, Anyways, all these things are very interesting, and I'd really love to see more experimentation with what triggers for people, what makes sense for people in these contexts.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of user interface, I'm kind of shying away from making like a perfect user interface, because I can always go to like smaller workshops, and that's sometimes like very easy, and like I show like what's going on, and so just like you said, so I mean, it's kind of linear that I can do how many workshops at a time, but I mean, these things would hopefully bubble up. So I mean, I think I'm not naively thinking that you have like a perfect user interface and then like instantly you have like multiple thousands of people doing it. So, but that's I think another kind of strategy I'm taking deliberately. But I'm kind of not answering that question.
All right, so we only have 4 minutes left in the session. So the last question for you guys is, so now you guys trying to like expressing each people's opinion and how to merge the one opinion to execute, right? So what is the most difficult stuff to achieving like a ideal state or something like that in the Kakogawa or Boston or wherever, and how we can using the mechanism or technology to express our opinion, because the Glenn said, like quadratic voting is one of the way to showing the more high resolution, right? Then the people could be agree or disagree. So it's kind of like a mechanism to showing more high resolution. And then it's not only like a quadratic funding or quadratic voting. What is you interesting about the mechanism or system or platform, whatever, to achieving the good democracy, better democracy, something like that?
Should I start? So I generally agree with Glenn said. Like it's a moving target. So like given we have like propagation proxy voting, quadratic voting, this would change, and I think it's natural to assume that this would change. So I don't think there's a final state. But also I would like to say, in terms of propagation proxy voting, Suzuki-san said it's going to take 300 years. So let's think in kind of that cycle. But my idea is to kind of shorten that in 10x, and hopefully we have something in 10 years. But again, what I see in 10 years would change. So it's basically, maybe it's just software engineering, is we just keep doing it and just kind of continuously, perpetually doing a beta version. I think that's the most healthiest way. Again, I think I'm keep kind of escaping from answering questions, but that's my vision.
Yeah, so we can provide tools, and also we can work with someone who wants to try this kind of things. So we need more people who want to join and try this kind of new experiment, like Mayor of Kakogawa. He chose Decidim, and also maybe we can start the participatory budgeting process in future. So I think the participatory budgeting is maybe easier than joining the policy making discussion. Just you can choose what you need. So maybe it's more easy.
Mayor of Shibuya, Ken Hasegawa, is another really interesting person. And now we have this new Mirai team, and we have interest at the national level. So I think part of it is making it part of a narrative, a story about what Japan's doing that's unique and that can be important to its image and to how people feel pride, and as it was in Taiwan, and not just part of you know, a technical city level thing. You know, the YIMBY stories is a part of that as well. And in the remaining few seconds, maybe we could take one question from the audience. That would be great. Does anyone in the audience have a question? Oh yeah, go ahead.
May I ask about the quadratic funding?
Yeah.
I'm submitting the Gitcoin grants several times, and right now they are really focused on how to filter the AI or the cyber attackers.
Yeah.
So they are making the ranking system for the users with the Gitcoin passport or past funding record. But in this situation, it became more harder to get fund for the local small, but it's very important project because they don't have a connection with the power users. Like more power use in the Gitcoin situation, there are a lot of power users in US, but there are few people in Asia. So Asian public goods project cannot get fund from the for the Gitcoin.
Yeah.
I think the Gitcoin ecosystem became too big. So how do you think about the appropriate size of the ecosystem for the quadratic funding?
Well, a couple comments about that. So first of all, the passport system, I think, was mostly a failure because it put up too many barriers to entry, as you're saying. And I think it's been almost completely replaced with the connection-oriented quadratic funding now. And I think that's working much better. So that's great, and so that addresses part of the question. But the other part of your question, which I think is very, very important, is that a fundamental problem in Gitcoin is it conceptualizes itself in a very global way. And I think there's a role for very broad things, but there's also a role for the local deployment of this. And it's hard to do a completely global thing that's also really useful for the local ones, because the local ones will look like like a group attack to the global system, and it should, right? Because you wouldn't actually want some global system that's giving out funding to give most of its funding to one municipality in Japan. That wouldn't make any sense. And so my hope is eventually that there will be rounds that are local at different levels of resolution, and the role of the global stuff will actually be mostly to build collaborations between the local ones. And so, yeah, that shouldn't go to a local area in Japan. But it only really works if there's that whole ecosystem. You know what I mean? And that's something to aspire to. But I think it's kind of, in some ways, a feature of a global round that it shouldn't fund any local thing. But on the other hand, we also want to get those local rounds, funding local goods and then building bridges between them,
All right, so thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have any time to take in any other questions, so probably you can ask the Grant about the priority or quadratic funding mechanism and talking about steep funding to the Sakai-san and the Destin for the Haru-san. All right, so thanks so much.